Hello everyone. By now, you're probably already familiar with how to move things around the environment and the viewport. You're familiar with the outliner and how to select and focus in on objects there, and you should already have a pretty good idea about how to move around the content browser down here to be able to find the assets that you need and be able to bring them into your level. We're going to take this understanding a little bit further by learning how to import objects into this asset browser for us to be able to use in our level. If you don't already have one, you will need to get an Epic Game account. This is free, and you're able to then use this to either use free assets or purchase ones if you choose to. However, you'll find that the free assets is quite extensive, and you can normally find most of what you need to be able to get started in here. The one that we're going to be using for our first assignment is going to be called Advanced Village Pack. And there's this one here. If you click on it here, it will bring up a description and it will tell you around here which engines it supports. Now, as you can see, this only goes up to 4.27. It does not go up to 5. And we will deal with that later and talk about how we can get that into the same engine. Here, you'll normally get a description about what is in the pack, as well as normally a link to a YouTube or somewhere else to be able to see what's actually in the pack before you download it. Once we have it, we can simply click here on Add to Project and then select the project that we want to use. I'm going to be using, as you can see here, when I search for the project, it doesn't show all of them. It only shows the ones that it's compatible with. If I click here on All, it will show me number 5, and it will immediately warn me that this is not compatible with 5. And it will ask me to select the closest alternative version, in this case, 4.27. I can now click Add to Project, and this, for your first time, should start downloading, and then it will actually add it into your project browser here. As you can see, Advanced Village Pack now appears in my content browser. If I double click on this now and go into Meshes, I can now see all of the assets that I would be able to use in creation of a level. I can even look at a preview mesh of that level to be able to actually start thinking about how I might lay out my assets. For this part of the assignment, what we want you to look at doing is just making a small village center. You can either use this outline that is already here and try and incorporate some of these static meshes into your level, or we can go up to File, New Level, and just pick the basic map here. The point of this exercise is not necessarily to make a large open world map. The idea is to try and make an interesting, small, playable level here that we can fill with interactive elements. A few things before we get started. Now that we have started a new map, there's a good chance that when we press play, we won't have a player start. So remember, go up to Windows, Place Actors, and put your player start somewhere in the level. The second thing you're going to want to consider is making sure that your player can't go off of the edge here by using meshes to block them in. That will come into more level design, and while not essential, is a good idea and a good challenge to set yourself. As you'll notice, there's a lot of different assets in here that you can use to start building your world. There are some that are better to just place individually, while others we can use the foliage tool to be able to paint onto this map, and we'll show you that in just a minute. But for now, let's just get started with just having a small house as our center project. And then from there, let's just build some fences around it. Later on, we'll look at how to create fence splines, which will allow you to be able to paint in different fences and have them move along a certain path. But for now, we're just going to look at putting in a simple square fence. Now let's say, for example, I didn't want to have to do that all again. I could select all of them, hold down the Alt key, and that will allow me to duplicate it. Further to that, if I press the Control G, it will actually group all of them and center my pivot point. Now, as I duplicate that entire group, it will allow me to rotate from the center. This can be a useful way of being able to quickly block out a level. From here, we'll start to have a look at how you can use the foliage tool to quickly block out some areas of grass. Over here, if we now go over to our selected mode, we can see that we have a lot of different options to be able to choose from. Landscape we'll look at later when we start blocking in our landscape and start looking at fence blinds. For now, we're just going to look at foliage. Foliage allows us to be able to select an area and instantly spawn instances of these static meshes. We can decide whether they have collision or not have collision and how they behave depending on which mesh we're working with. For example, a lot of these meshes are designed to be able to be used in this method. It's a very simple method where we simply select the grass that we want to use, left click and drag, and drop it into the foliage tab here. If it's clicked, we can go into the details here, which we might want to start looking at. But first let's paint it in, and then we can talk about those options. So now you'll see that my cursor has changed to this large blue circle. If I want to increase this size, I can simply go up here to brush size and increase it like so. Now, when I hold down left click and drag, it will immediately paint in all of these grass. If I wanted to change the density to make it larger, I could pull this all the way up to 1. And now as I paint it, it will become more dense. If I want to lower that, I can lower it down further as well. I'm just going to start now by painting in as much of the map as possible with this, and then we'll start talking about how you can delete it and carve out a path for our level to exist in. As you can see, while this has worked, it has also put brush on top of our static meshes. That is because on here on filter, I don't just have landscape, but also static mesh and BSPP brushes. To erase this area, I'm just going to hold down Shift and left click. That will erase this area. If, however, I wanted to avoid this from going in further, I can just uncheck static meshes. However, you'll notice that I can no longer paint on anything, as even this ground floor is a static mesh. Later on, when we start looking at landscapes, we'll start talking a little bit more about how we can put in a landscape to be able to allow us to paint on it. But we can all do that later. For now, I just wanted to get used to painting in these elements here. Switch static meshes back on and get used to painting it, but then clearing it from different areas of your static mesh. For example, now that we have this, we could probably carve ourselves out a path or a road for this to exist down. Now that we have our road, we can quickly start blocking out our scene. Consider what this house might be used for. Consider what it is that they might start trading in, and start organizing out a different story using all of the props that you have at your disposal. I'll leave you now to start doing that for yourself, and when we come back in the next session, we'll start looking at landscape.